Hello, my name is Ty McCormick. I am the lead faculty for the Controlled Environment Ag program here at Santa Fe Community College. Today I'm going to be presenting to you about fish in aquaponics. So why fish? As you can see, there's a number of great reasons to choose fish as an organism to raise and enjoy, and we're going to be going over a lot of these today. One of the biggest reasons for raising fish is their incredible feed conversion ratio. So feed conversion ratio is the pounds of feed to pounds of flesh conversion. You can see fish have a very low FCR, and that's what you want. And cattle have a very high FCR, so it takes about 6.8 pounds of feed to gain 1 pound of body mass in those cattle. Whereas for fish, it takes 1.1 pounds of feed to create 1 pound of body mass. And there are reasons for that, which we'll be talking about later in this presentation. Believe it or not, fish also have a very low water footprint. Each droplet on this diagram is equivalent to 500 liters of water. And you can see that fish are even less. It's not even a full water droplet. So they're very efficient with water as well. You can see in this diagram that after the 1980s, 1990s, wild capture is just not what it used to be. Those wild populations aren't able to recover. And so aquaculture has come into its place to make up for that and to feed our growing population. And you can see that this trend will only continue to grow in the future as our population grows as well. And hopefully it will allow for those wild stocks to replenish themselves over time and reduce the pressure. And in 2011, fish production surpassed beef production, and this trend will continue due to sustainability. So why fish farming? They found in a lot of wild fish there are a number of toxins, including mercury, which is found in nearly all fish. And it tends to accumulate in older fish, like predators, like tuna and bass. Mercury can cause neurological and developmental damage. They've also found pollutants such as PCBs, dioxins, and DDT. These are considered persistent organic pollutants, and they can accumulate in the fish tissue. So the higher up that fish is in the food chain, the more these pollutants will accumulate in their systems. And so me personally, I would like to feed my family fish that don't contain these toxins, that are grown in a controlled environment. Here are some great resources for learning more about fish production after you watch and take notes on our presentation today. So let's get started with fish anatomy. I would like you to take a moment to pause, draw this fish, and label all of the parts of the fish anatomy listed here. There is one fish anatomy part that is covered by this circle, and that is the ovaries. So please be sure to include the ovaries in your anatomy drawing. So fish are cold-blooded. They have a swim bladder that they use for buoyancy, which will allow them to move vertically in the water column. They are scaled for protection. Most, or usually, they have scales. Most will lay eggs. They have all 5 senses present, but they do have a less developed central nervous system. Here are some external parts of the fish anatomy that you might also want to include. So there are the eyes. Some fish use their eyes to find food. Others use smell through their nair, which is the fish nostril. Again, we talked about scales, and those are used to protect the fish against predators, parasites, disease, and abrasion. The fish have their mouth and jaws that they use to take in water for dissolved oxygen. So water will come in through the mouth, move through the gills, and then out through the operculum, or the gill covering. And as the water is moving through the gills, the dissolved oxygen is extracted. We call the mouth opening of the fish the gape. Again, we talked about the operculum, or the covering of the gills. The vent is in the rear end of the fish. That's where the genital papillae is located. The genital papillae is a small, fleshy, tube-like structure located behind the anus, and in many fish species is used to release eggs or sperm. And this is also the place where waste is excreted from, along with a little urine. And then the fish have their fins. There's the pectoral, the pelvic, dorsal, anal, and tail. I won't expect you to memorize the fins and their placement. But just know that they are used for maneuverability, for steering, balance, stability, propulsion, and movement. So we talked about fish respiration. Again, as water is drawn in through the mouth, it moves out through the gills and through the operculum and extracts dissolved oxygen. Some fish will breathe air. Many of these species are warm water fish, and they live in low quality, low oxygen water. Examples of these are walking catfish, electric eels, mud skippers. Note that ammonia is also excreted through the gills, and some is excreted through the vent. Solid waste is also excreted through the vent of the fish. So about 97% of fish lay eggs. These type of fish are called oviparous fish, and they include many of the fish we talk about in aquaponics, like salmon, trout, goldfish, tilapia, and koi. Some of these fish are nest builders. So they'll build a nest, the female will lay the eggs, the male will come and release sperm to fertilize the eggs, and sometimes they'll leave it at that. Others, after the nest is built, the eggs are laid and fertilized, some of those fish will come back and put those fertilized eggs, the female will put the fertilized eggs in their mouth and protect those eggs until they hatch. Tilapia are an example of fish that are mouth brooders. And other fish are hermaphrodites, so they contain both male and female sex organs. So another name for the testes in fish, they'll be called milt. The eggs are the ovaries. As after the eggs are fertilized, the fertilized eggs will grow and develop into larvae. As they hatch out of their eggs, they are sac fry. And they're called sac fry because they have a little sac that they hold on to that's attached to their body underneath, and it contains the nutrients for them so they can kind of grow a little bit more and become stronger before they start looking for their own food. And as that sac is kind of consumed by the young fish, it will become a fry and then a fingerling. And then the fingerlings in aquaponic systems are what we put in to our tanks to grow out. And then some of those fish will reach an age for reproduction. So as a farmer, you can decide whether you want to outsource those fish or breeding, and we'll be talking about that later in this presentation. So fish feed and nutrition. Fish need protein, carbs, fats, vitamins, and minerals. So please write these 5 items down for your notes. Also make note that fish need a higher protein if they're carnivorous. Lipids or fats can include omega-3s and 6s through EPA and DHA. This is supplied to the fish through a fish oil. The carbs for a fish feed are typically low-cost fillers, but they'll give the fish high energy, low digestibility. It helps to create the float of the floating feeds. And then vitamins and minerals are also included in these feeds for health and to boost immunity. So here's a great image of some of the different fish feeds that are used. And you can see it goes from almost a powdery dust to a decent sized pellet. And I want you to make a note that the pellet size used for fish feed is dependent on the fish gape or mouth opening. So you want to make it should be small enough that the fish can devour it in one bite. So which fish should you choose for aquaponics? There's a lot of choices out there. Here are some factors to consider. Think how well the fish could be raised in the culture of a recirculating aquaculture system. Can it be easily trained onto commercial diets? How fast does it grow? Can it be tolerant to stress and poor water quality? Is it resistant to diseases? What is its feed conversion ratio? Each species has a slightly different one. Can it be easily reproduced? Are the temperature and oxygen demands similar to the plants you want to grow? And is it marketable? Another thing to consider is, can you grow it in New Mexico or whatever state you choose to live in? Make sure to do your research with your local game and fish department and state and county regulations. So as we go through, I'm going to talk about some of the fish that you can raise in an aquaponics system. I want you to write the name of the fish and at least one pro and one con for each type of fish we talk about. So let's start with tilapia. Tilapia are the number 4 most consumed fish in the US. They are the tofu of fish, so they can be used in a lot of different types of cuisine. They're resistant to diseases. They're tolerant to poor water quality. They're omnivores, so they're a candidate for all plant diets. They need complete diets in aquaponics systems, and there are feeds that you can use specifically for tilapia in aquaponics systems that will feed both the fish and the plants. For tilapia, cannibalism is not an issue, so you can have multiple ages of fish in the same tank and they won't cannibalize one another. They're easy to breed if you want to do that, and we'll talk about tilapia breeding later in this presentation. And you can stock all males for uniform fast growth. That's what we do here at the Santa Fe Community College. In fact, the company we buy our fish from, they only sell male tilapia for that reason. And they're also Eurohaline. And what does that mean? It means that the fish can tolerate different levels of salinity or salt in the water. So tilapia, they're okay in fresh water. They'd also be okay in salt water or brackish water as well. Carp is another fish species that could be used in aquaponics. It's the most cultured and consumed fish globally, however, not the most beloved. They can handle low dissolved oxygen and poor water quality. Many species to consider. There's some grass carp out there that you can use to stock your tanks that are available through approved breeders through the Game and Fish Department. They're primarily omnivores as well, so they can use vegetarian diets. They can be trained on commercial floating feeds. They do need hormone treatment for spawning if you want to start your own fish breeding program, but know that they're typically a low value fish. If you compare it to koi, which is a very high value fish. And there's a lot of bones that you have to pick through when you're eating a carp. Catfish is another fish to consider. They're very hardy. They can tolerate a high total ammonia nitrogen and low nitrates. Some catfish breathe fresh air, so they'll come to the surface to get oxygen. They have smaller feces than tilapia, so it makes for a quicker mineralization. However, they do need bottom space, so you have to reduce your stocking density for these fish, but they are very marketable. Trout in particular, rainbow trout, one of the most popular in recirculating aquaculture systems. They need a high-fat, high-protein diet. They are carnivores. A lot of people report a muddy flavor of farmed trout, and that can be a concern. They like a very low water temperature and high dissolved oxygen, also very high water quality. And many plant species don't do well with the water temperature that trout require. Okay, another option is largemouth bass. Largemouth bass are carnivores, so they need high protein diets. You need to make sure that the cohorts of your fish are separated by size group, because if you have a largemouth bass with the smaller one, it's going to eat the larger one will be consuming the younger fish in the system, and that's going to reduce your overall population. You can have variable growth, but you do need to make sure that they are in separate tanks. They have a high nitrite tolerance. They like warmer temperatures. Young fry like to feed on zooplankton, and they can quickly transition to insect larvae and then small fish as they grow. So keep an eye on that. We put sturgeon in here. Know that sturgeon take a very long time to grow. And this is Justin Henry, who has the quote, "Dirty waters for fish, clean waters for fish farmers," noting that, sturgeon in particular, they're okay with a little muckier water. We all expect this clean, beautiful, pristine water for the fish to be swimming around in, but fish don't necessarily need that. Now, about the sturgeon in particular, they're considered the tortoise of recirculating aquaculture systems. It takes them about 11 years to grow to maturity, but it's very rewarding if you can wait that long, because sturgeon produce a very high quality caviar, which can be sold on the market for $34 for a 12-gram tin, or up to $2,123 for a 1-kilo tin. And after harvesting the caviar, all the other parts of the fish can be sold. They have a very versatile meat that can be used for a number of different cuisines. The head, spinal marrow, gizzard, liver, and swim bladder are also sold. And sometimes the fins of the sturgeon can be a substitute for shark fin. So lots of versatility there. You just have to play the long game for the sturgeon. Koi is another fun fish to raise if you're not so into harvesting the fish. And this is great if you want to keep them for pets. They can tolerate a number of different temperatures and varied water conditions. They produce high amounts of nutrients, supporting fast plant growth, but require robust mechanical filtration to prevent clogged grow beds. So keep an eye on that waste for koi. Koi can grow very large. They can grow up to 3 feet and live for decades. They can live from 25 to 35 years. But just know the larger they get, the larger their tanks need to be. And note as well, as temperatures start to get colder, feeding should be reduced or stopped because their metabolism is going to slow down as well, and that's going to reduce the ammonia production for the fish. Okay, so koi are another great option. Prawn, if you want to have a or a polyculture in your system, prawn is a great option. They can help to speed up the mineralization of solids. So they like to live at the bottom of the tank and filter through those solids produced by the fish. It's highly recommended that you produce a type of 3D environment for them. So here is a crate with some mesh in it. They'll crawl in that mesh. They also use that area to molten or shed their exoskeletons as they grow. They do need a fair amount of space. Each prawn, as they get larger, they'll need about a square meter of living space per prawn. And you don't want them to get into the plant area of your aquaponic system because they will eat your roots. But they have a pretty quick grow out cycle, about 4 months. And they do a great job improving the overall water quality of your system, making more nutrients available. Okay, so those are some organisms to consider for aquaponics. We're going to move on to fish health and disease. So one of the most important things you can do for your fish is maintain good water quality. Make sure that you're observing your fish every day. Notice how well they're eating. And make sure that you're keeping a very clean environment for your fish. Reduce the amount of stress that fish might encounter as well. Disease. So the more at unease the fish are, the more susceptible they are for diseases in your system. So for aquaponics, treatments are fairly limited. If you're using an aquaculture system, you could put different medications into the water to help the fish out, but typically those medications you don't want your plants to be exposed to as well. It could also affect the bacteria. So typically what's done if sick fish are found in an aquaponic system is they're removed from that system and placed in a separate tank. From there, they could be given aquarium salt. This helps sick freshwater fish by reducing their stress, improving gill function, boosting their immune system, and treating external parasites, bacteria, and fungi. It acts as an electrolyte booster and helps heal injuries by stimulating a protective slime coat. Salt also helps to prevent nitrite poisoning. And then there are certain medicated feeds that fish could be given. Another treatment possibility is heat. So by raising water temperature for the fish, it helps to boost their immune system, it accelerates their metabolism to fight infection, and disrupts the life cycle of parasites like ick. So this will help them to recover faster as well. So there's a couple things you can do to help your fish out without having to use a medicated feed. Once those fish look better, then you can reintroduce them to your aquaponics system again. So recirculating aquaculture systems are more biosecure than open systems. Some open systems are outside, and there's a lot of factors that you cannot control in those. And just remember, the sooner you see a diseased fish, the sooner you need to remove it. This is an important practice as a fish owner because you don't want any of this to spread and harm your entire operation. So what does a healthy fish look like? These are some butterfly koi we just got in on Friday. And you can see,
That's very good.
Even Pedro agrees. You know, their fins are extended, their tails are straight, they're swimming normally. They have a strong appetite. That we did find in this group, we ordered, Sai actually ordered 60 fish, and one of them had a lesion on the side. And so we removed that one right away. And the rest are swimming, you know, in the water. They're not rubbing or scraping the sides of the tank. They're not piping at the surface. Their eyes look really clear and shiny.
That's very good. That's very good.
So I want you to take a moment and write down some of the causes of stress for fish, for pH changes and temperature changes. These are two of the most common stresses that occur for fish. Some things to look out for. Also, make note that fish piping at the surface could be a sign of ammonia or nitrite poisoning. It could also be a sign that the dissolved oxygen in your system is too low. You might want to pause the video and write those notes down. So overall, know that disease is caused by a susceptible host. So a host that's under stress, if your fish are stressed, they're going to be more susceptible to disease. If there are more pathogens introduced into your system, maybe from people or other organisms coming by, a conducive environment such as poor water quality is going to lead to fish being stressed and then diseases being more able to infect your fish. So, all of these things contribute to a fish getting sick. Okay, so let's move on and talk about production of tilapia. If you decide to raise your own tilapia or have a breeding program, typically they'll have male and female fish in a tank. The female will lay the eggs. The male will release sperm over those eggs on the bottom of the tank, and then the female will scoop those fertilized eggs into her mouth. From there, the farmer will catch that female fish and extract the fertilized eggs from her mouth and put them into this container to the far left that we call a McDonald jar. That McDonald jar will have water that moves through it and kind of helps to circulate the eggs in the bottom of the jar. This This will help to keep the eggs healthy and moving. This is also what the mother tilapia would do when she was holding the fish in her mouth. She would let some water in and move those eggs around over time. Now we outsource. We don't have a breeding program at our school, and we do this for many reasons. It's to save time, space, and money on equipment, and it's not easy to deal with a bunch of baby fish. So to simplify our work, we work with Americulture. They are on the approved list for the state of New Mexico. They supply the best tilapia genetics in the US. They're fast growing and have a high fillet percentage and are disease free. So check with your state for regulations in terms of what fish you can source for your farm. And there's a list in the Game and Fish website. So this image shows the size of tilapia that we receive from Americulture. Just like lettuce production is staggered, we do the same with fish in our aquaponics systems. So for lettuce, we have a weekly staggering, but for fish, it's a monthly staggering. It takes about 3 months to get a fish to the fingerling stage at about 50 grams. At that size, we will move them into our aquaponics systems. And we wait till they're about 50 grams each, because at that size, they cannot get into our pipes and clog the pipes, or they can't flow through the pipes and get into our plant beds, because if tilapia get into your plant beds, they will eat your roots and harm the growth of your plants. So after we stock the fish, it's another 6 to 10 months of grow out, and then we usually harvest our fish at 9 months. But from that, you can if you're constantly stocking your fish every 3 months, then every 3 months you can do a harvest as well. And we'll be talking about that in a few weeks when we go over the 454 article. So when our fish are adults, we typically feed them at about 3% of their overall body weight. Younger than that, they're going to be fed a little bit more, as you can see here. So what I want you to put down for your notes is that when fish are younger, they're fed at about a higher rate, and then as they get older, we feed them at about 3% of their overall body weight. Also make a note that fry need a protein percentage of about 50%, and as they get older, we reduce that protein percentage to about 30% of their diet. Also make a note of the different types of fish pellets. We have sinking and floating, and the benefits of each, or downfalls, really, because sinking pellets, you can't see how much of the feed is being eaten by the fish, so you might have a lot of solids building up that you can't see in your tanks. So please list these 2 feed strategies. You can feed ad libitum or to saturation, so the fish basically get to eat as much as they can during a certain time period. They could be fed 2 to 4 times a day, and the farmer really gets to know their fish and how much feed they end up eating. Another way of feeding fish is by looking at their percentage of body weight. And you can look at their growth rate, their feed conversion ratio, and their overall survival. So with that, you would give them a daily ration, a certain amount every time, and you would feed your fish between 2 to 4 times a day. So please list the two types of feed presentation. We have hand feeding and the demand feeder, and write the advantages and disadvantages of each. So with hand feeding, the advantages are you can observe your fish. You can see if they're healthy, how well they're eating. A disadvantage is it's labor intensive, so it's something you have to do, 2 to 4 times a day. The other feed presentation is a demand feeder. The advantage of that is the fish can eat whenever they want, so there's less labor involved. The disadvantage is, you know, the greedy nature of fish. You're going to have a higher feed conversion ratio, so some of that fish, they're going to eat more than they need. There will be bullies in the system, so that means some fish are going to eat more of the feed and keep other fish from eating feed, so you're going to have different sizes of fish in your system. There could be breakdowns, so if you're not monitoring it carefully, maybe it runs out of feed, or maybe it's not functioning properly, and so the fish aren't getting any of the food that they need. And it does take some capital. It'll be more expensive. So you have to weigh those out when you're considering how to feed your fish. Another thing to consider is feed storage. So make sure that you're keeping your feed in a cold, dry place. I would like you to write all of this down in your notes. Know that inadequate storage leads to nutrient loss. So if your feed is exposed to sunlight, it's going to reduce the vitamin quality and content in your feed. If it's in a hot building, it's going to create rancid fats. And then if it gets wet, you're going to find that that feed will start to mold. So again, make sure that your feed is in a cold, dry place. It could be an air-conditioned room. Make sure to keep an eye on the expiration date. Don't stack the bags any higher than 10 per pallet. And then make sure as you get new feed, you place the new feed to the back. So you have the first in, first out strategy. Use up the old bags first before you break into the new bags. Also make sure whatever way that you're storing these feeds that it's a rodent resistant building. Because as we all know, those rodents will get in there and eat and defecate on the food, making it unusable for your operation. So again, when fish are fed properly, your water quality will be controlled. It's going to make less work for you. You're going to see high growth and a low feed conversion ratio. The growth of the fish will be uniform. You're not going to see the bullies and runts in the system. And you will have a nice dress out, a nice grow out of your fish, a nice fillet production. Nutrition linked diseases will be eliminated. So I'll show you a picture of a fish that has scoliosis, which is caused by insufficient nutrients in fish. But you might also see cataracts or fat deposits develop on your fish as well if they're not being fed the appropriate diet. So here's that picture, that top image there is a fish with scoliosis. That fish was not given the proper nutrition as it was growing, and it caused a curvature of the spine. So if you're not feeding your fish properly, you're going to find poor water quality. You're going to be worried about ammonia and nitrite spikes in your water. You're going to see slow growth of your fish and have a high feed conversion ratio. Nutrition-linked diseases such as the scoliosis on the left, and also you'll see less uniformity overall in your fish. You're not going to get that beautiful, clean, expected fillet size. Finally, with a lot of fish, it's good to purge the fish. And so what is purging? Please write this down. Purging is where 3 to 5 days before you harvest a fish, you will remove the fish from its environment and put it in a clean water tank and not feed it. So Put it in the clean water, let it sit in that water for 3 to 5 days off feed, and that is going to remove the off flavor, or if you've ever tasted it before, it's that muddy flavor of the fish. And then when you harvest, you'll have a nice, clean tasting fish. So purge those fish for purity. And finally, we're going to leave you with this. Make a note here that it is important if you are raising fish in New Mexico or any state, you need to check and see everything required by law. Make sure to do your research. Check with the city, state, and county in terms of their rules for raising fish. Check with your game and fish department to see what types of licenses and who you can purchase your fish from. And, that way you're running a clean operation and you don't have to worry about being busted and, have that setback after you went through all the pain of researching and designing and putting together your system. So that is our lecture today on fish in aquaponics, and have a great day. I'll see you next class.